use military force against Hezbollah and against Iran and come out with a victory. And if anything, it looks like they're going to pay an awful price. The ultra-Orthodox basically refuse to serve in the military. And given that they are now 13% of the population and they are growing in numbers, I read somewhere the other day that by the year 2050, 48% of the population that is eligible for military service will be ultra-Orthodox. Just think about that. 48% of your population is ultra-Orthodox, and the ultra-Orthodox basically don't serve in the military. You can get away with that, Glenn, if you fight short wars. And as I said to you a minute ago, in the old days, the Israelis fought short wars. Think about the 6-day war, right? But this is not a short war. And if you think about what we're saying here, we don't see any end in sight to these conflicts, right? And if you have a military that's heavily dependent on reservists, you're going to wear those reservists out. And at the same time, you're not going to be able to call on a reasonably large slice of your population. It's now 13%, but the number will increase over time to serve in the military, to help out those existing reservists. So the Israelis have a real manpower problem inside their military that looks like it only gets worse with the passage of time. And this creates huge problems for the IDF. But the other dimension to this, which has nothing to do with manpower, which is of tremendous importance, is the coming of missiles. In the old days, missiles just didn't matter very much. They were not irrelevant, but they didn't matter all that much. Now you have a situation where Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, the Houthis, all have missiles and rockets, and they are aimed at Israel. And this is a huge problem for Israel because there's no easy way to deal with this missile threat, as we're seeing today. And if anything, the missile threat is going to get worse with the passage of time because missiles are proliferating, their accuracy is improving, the yield of the warhead is improving, and the end result is you have an Israel that is surrounded externally by a number of adversaries that have rockets and missiles. And then you marry that to the centrifugal forces inside the society that you were talking about, right? It's ultra-Orthodox versus secular. And even within the secular community, you have right-wingers and left-wingers and so forth and so on. When you think about all of those centrifugal forces, and then you think about the external threat environment, you see that Israel is in really deep, deep trouble today, and it only gets worse with the passage of time. My view of international relations is that states usually act rationally. They usually act according to realist logic. But no theory can account for every case. And there are a good number of cases, not the majority by any means. My intuition is about 25% of the cases out there don't fit with the realist story. And there are cases where great powers like the United States do act in an irrational or non-rational way. I think I could make a compelling case that the invasion of Iraq in 2003 was irrational. I think I could make a case that the Bay of Pigs, the Kennedy administration's performance during the Bay of Pigs operation, was irrational. So it's important to understand that sometimes states do act irrationally, or to put it in slightly different terms, they don't act according to realist logic. Now, my second point has to do with Israel. You know, there was a piece in Haaretz today about the growing interest in Messianism inside of Israel, which dovetails with what you are saying. And it's a really worrisome piece because the argument in the piece is that it's not only people who are deeply religious who are being caught up in this messianic fervor, it's people who tend to be on the right. So it could be. I haven't studied what's going on inside Israel careful enough to know if that's playing a key role in driving the train. Furthermore, you could argue that some of it has to do with the fact that Netanyahu understands that if he leaves office, or he ends the war and leaves office, that he'll then be held accountable by the Israeli judicial system.
Absolutely.
Because he is under indictment.
Okay, so just to make a few points here, guys. Number one, John Mearsheimer, he basically mentioned about the number of people, the ultra-Orthodox Jew, serving in the military. Recently, the number of people who left Israel, there are in thousands of them after October 7. Israel now have severe crisis of manpower. And I have already mentioned from, I believe, Scott Ritter, he also mentioned this, that 10,000 Israeli soldiers got either killed or injured, means they are not capable of doing their duties as a military. Therefore, it is making things much worse for Israel when it comes to manpower. Number 2 point, Messianic movement in Israel is very, very famous. Back in the year 2001, I believe that happened. Before Netanyahu assumed leadership, he was told by rabbis and his followers that we are going to be voting you in the office with one purpose, and that is you will expedite, quote unquote, the coming of the Messiah. That's what they believe will come if they can somehow expedite the process, and therefore they have chosen Netanyahu for that. And number 3 point, guys, is obvious. Netanyahu is in this war only for himself. His ministers, his minions, all of them will be in jail once this war is over. The good thing for Netanyahu is that, as Abby Martin, she mentioned, there is only, or less than I should say, 2% of Israelis who oppose this genocide. Means more than 98% people, they support what Netanyahu is doing in Gaza, which is completely eviscerating the people of Palestine, people of Gaza, and also West Bank. The good news for the Iranian now, as I have mentioned in my other video, on the other hand, is that they have Russia on their side. Scott Ritter, he recently commented and he said, Russia, however, though, they do not want Iran to go on a full-scale war. The Zionists, they do not want to completely go on a war with them face-to-face and with all the military power. On that condition, Putin agreed that he will be helping Iran against the Zionist regime. John Mearsheimer, whatever he's painting for Israel, their future, it's bleak. It's absolutely looking horrendous. And the only way they can save themselves would be to really come to this term that we will be defeated. We are not God's chosen people as we believe, because somehow the Israelis, the Zionists, they convince themselves because they're chosen people, they cannot be defeated. They never learn from their past history. Never, ever. And this is what they're doing. They're repeating their history, and they will this time face a lot more humiliation and more destruction that they have ever faced in the history of Judaism, in the history of Zionism. They really need to stop and recognize their situation is just getting worse and worse and worse.